The dim glow of a solitary candle flickers against the stone walls of a cramped tavern tucked away in the backstreets of 14th century Paris. A hooded figure slides a scrap of parchment across the rough wooden table, fingers brushing just long enough for the message to change hands unnoticed. To any passerby, it's nothing a scrap of parchment, maybe a merchant's ledger or a love note. But to the man who pockets it with a barely perceptible nod, it's a lifeline. That single sheet holds the fate of kings, written in a language only a handful of souls alive could decipher. This was the shadowy world of medieval spies, where every whisper could topple empires, and the wrong word in the wrong ear could mean a knife in the dark. And their most powerful weapon, not steel or poison, but the secret codes and hidden languages they wielded like invisible blades. Imagine a time when entire wars were fought not just on battlefields, but in the margins of manuscripts, in the twist of a thread, even in the way a loaf of bread was placed on a windowsill. The spies of the Middle Ages didn't just rely on stealth, they mastered the art of speaking without speaking. They crafted languages so cunning, so layered with double meanings, that even if their messages were intercepted, they'd be useless to anyone but the intended recipient. Some codes were so sophisticated that scholars are still unraveling them centuries later. These weren't just tricks, they were masterpieces of deception, born from a world where trust was deadly and every word could be your last. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on these brilliant, clandestine systems that shaped history from the shadows. We'll uncover how a simple embroidery pattern could hide battle plans, how a monk's scribbled notes might have smuggled state secrets, and why some of these codes were so effective they're still used as inspiration by modern intelligence agencies. This is the story of how language itself became a weapon, and how the spies of the Middle Ages turned ink, parchment, and sheer ingenuity into tools of power. By the time we're done, you'll never look at an old manuscript or a faded tapestry the same way again, because hidden in plain sight between the lines and beneath the surface lies a secret history waiting to be decoded. In the cutthroat courts and battlefields of the Middle Ages, secrecy wasn't just a precaution, it was a matter of life and death. Picture this: a single misplaced word could reveal an assassination plot, betray a traitor's identity, or expose an entire network of agents to the executioner's axe. Spies didn't just work in shadows, they thrived in them, because in a world where kings and queens played chess with human lives, information was the most dangerous piece on the board. Political intrigue alone made covert communication essential. Alliances shifted like sand, and today's trusted advisor could be tomorrow's enemy. Take the Wars of the Roses, where noble families schemed in whispers, or the Byzantine Empire, where courtiers traded secrets like currency. A message sent in plain language was a gamble intercepted, and entire rebellions could be crushed before they began. That's why spies turned to codes and ciphers, crafting messages that sounded like idle chatter or pious scribbles to anyone but the intended recipient. Wartime intelligence demanded even greater cunning. Armies moved on secrets when to strike, where to ambush, which gates would be left unguarded. In 1485, when Henry Tudor faced Richard III at Bosworth Field, hidden couriers carried battle plans stitched into clothing or baked into letters with invisible ink. One slip and the wrong king might claim the throne, but the stakes weren't just political. For the spies themselves, failure meant torture or worse. Captured messengers weren't just killed, they were made examples of broken on the wheel, hanged in public squares, their methods exposed to deter others. That's why the best codes were unbreakable even under duress. Some spies memorized entire languages invented just for their networks, while others used seemingly innocent objects like knotted ropes or flower arrangements to convey urgent warnings. The consequences of failure echo through history. The fall of Constantinople in 1453, some say a decoded message revealed weakened defenses. The assassination of Duke John the Fearless, a whispered plot overheard too late. Every intercepted letter, every cracked cipher could rewrite the fate of nations. And that's why medieval spies didn't just hide their messages, they made them disappear in plain sight, turning everyday objects into vessels of secrets only the right eyes could see. The medieval spy's toolkit was as diverse as it was ingenious, a labyrinth of hidden meanings designed to outwit even the sharpest minds. At its core, these clandestine methods fell into three masterful categories: substitution ciphers that twisted letters into riddles, symbolic codes where everyday objects whispered secrets, and invisible inks that made words vanish until the right moment. Each technique was a testament to the creativity of spies who turned the mundane into the extraordinary. Take substitution ciphers, the bread and butter of covert communication. These weren't just simple letter swaps, they were linguistic labyrinths. Some replaced entire words with symbols, like the cipher used by Mary, Queen of Scots, where a gallows doodle stood for betrayal. Others, like Caesar's cipher, favored by medieval diplomats, shifted letters down the alphabet by a set number. So, attack at dawn might become DWWDFNDWGDZQ to prying eyes. The most devious versions layered multiple substitutions, creating a puzzle so tangled that even if an enemy cracked one layer, the true message remained buried. Then there were symbolic codes where the ordinary became a veil for the extraordinary. A spy might arrange a bouquet of flowers to signal an ally, roses for danger, lilies for safety, or leave a loaf of bread on a windowsill at a precise angle to mark a dead drop. Tapestries and embroidery hid battle plans in their stitching. A misplaced thread could reveal the location of a hidden troop movement. These codes thrived on their innocence. To the untrained eye, they were just decoration or daily routine. But to those in the know, they were maps, warnings, and commands woven into the fabric of everyday life. But perhaps the most theatrical of all were the invisible inks, alchemy's gift to espionage. Lemon juice, milk, even urine, when dried, they left no trace. Heat the paper and the message would materialize like a ghost. The Byzantines perfected fire writing, using plant extracts that only appeared under flame, while Arab spies used mixtures of alum and vinegar that surfaced when brushed with another chemical. The beauty of these inks wasn't just their secrecy but their deniability. A spy caught with a blank parchment could swear innocence until the truth literally burst into flames. What tied these methods together was their elegance. They didn't just hide information, they weaponized the unsuspecting world around them. A scribe's quill, a lady's needle, a baker's loaf, all became double agents in the silent war of information. And as we'll see next, some of these techniques were so effective they'd endure for centuries, shaping the spycraft of our modern world. The Caesar cipher might sound like a relic of ancient Rome, but in the hands of medieval spies, it became something far more sophisticated, a weapon of secrecy that shaped the fate of kingdoms. At its core, the cipher was deceptively simple: shift every letter in the alphabet by a fixed number. Julius Caesar reportedly used a shift of 3, turning attack into DWWDFN. But medieval operatives didn't just borrow this trick, they refined it into an art form, layering complexity onto what seemed like child's play. Take the case of a 15th century Venetian diplomat, his letters crisscrossing enemy territories. He wouldn't settle for a single shift. Instead, he'd use multiple keys, shifting the first letter by 3, the next by 7, then back to 3, creating a pattern only his counterpart knew. Some spies even employed keyword shifts, where a prearranged word like raven dictated the sequence, the first letter shifted by 17 R's place in the alphabet, the next by 1 A, and so on. Break one layer and you'd still face a maze of moving letters, but the real brilliance lay in how keys were exchanged. Forget modern-day encryption handshakes, medieval spies relied on subtlety. A bishop might accidentally drop a psalm book during Mass, its underlined verses hinting at the shift number. A troubadour's song, its refrain repeating a specific count, could carry the key in plain hearing. Some networks used dated events, the year a castle fell or a saint's feast day, as mutable keys that changed with the calendar, ensuring even a leaked cipher would soon expire. The cipher's strength was its adaptability. In the hands of English agents during the 100 Years' War, it became a shifting mirror. French interceptors might crack a message shifted by 4, only to find the next batch used 9. And when suspicion arose, spies could abandon numbers altogether, swapping letters for symbols from alchemy or astrology, turning a simple cipher into a linguistic chameleon. Yet for all its cleverness, the Caesar cipher had one fatal flaw: frequency analysis. Arabic cryptographers had already discovered that repeating letters like E or T leave trails, and savvy codebreakers could reverse engineer the shift. That's why the smartest spies didn't rely on it alone. They'd encipher a message, then hide it in a shopping list or a prayer, nesting secrecy within secrecy. Because in the shadows of medieval espionage, survival didn't just depend on having a code, it depended on making sure no one even knew there was a code to break. Among the most elegant deceptions of medieval espionage were the codes woven into tapestries, grand, colorful masterpieces that hung in castles and cathedrals, hiding secrets in plain sight. To the untrained eye, these were merely decorative artworks celebrating battles or religious scenes, but to spies, every thread held intention. A misplaced stitch might mark the location of a hidden passage. A sudden shift in color could warn of an approaching army. These weren't just fabrics, they were encrypted maps, smuggled orders, and silent alarms stitched into history itself. Take the famous Bayeux Tapestry, an 11th century embroidery depicting the Norman conquest of England. Scholars still debate whether its seemingly chaotic borders filled with mythical beasts and unexplained symbols might conceal messages for William the Conqueror's allies. A dragon here, a half-hidden rune there, were these mere decorations or a covert language for those who knew how to look. Even the tapestry's layout is suspicious. Key battle scenes are oddly compressed, while seemingly minor moments sprawl across the fabric. Could this imbalance be hiding coded details about troop movements or supply routes? But the real masters of textile espionage were the Burgundian weavers of the 15th century. Their workshops produced tapestries for Europe's elite, each one a potential intelligence goldmine. A spy might commission a scene of St. George slaying the dragon, but the dragon's scales could secretly map out city fortifications, each color representing a different weakness in the walls. Other weavers used directional stitches like a compass, vertical threads signaling safety, diagonal ones warning of betrayal. Some tapestries even hid messages in their reverse sides, where loose threads formed letters visible only if you knew to lift the hanging and check beneath. The beauty of these codes lay in their deniability. Unlike an intercepted letter or a whispered conversation, a tapestry couldn't be easily altered or destroyed without raising suspicion. A nobleman couldn't accuse his queen of treason for gifting him a beautifully woven hunting scene, even if that scene's border of entwined serpents secretly identified his household traitors. And because tapestries were often collaborative projects involving teams of weavers over months or years, no single artisan ever held the full meaning. The spy who designed the pattern might be continents away by the time the finished work revealed its secrets. Perhaps the most chilling example comes from the court of Isabella of Castile, where a captured spy confessed under torture that her ladies-in-waiting had stitched rebellion plans into their embroidery hoops. A cluster of scarlet knots marked sympathizers in the royal guard. A gold-threaded fleur-de-lis, subtly misaligned, pointed to the weakest gate in the palace walls. When investigators burned the tapestries, the melting threads revealed previously invisible ink, proof that even fire couldn't always erase these woven secrets. What made tapestry codes so enduring was their dual nature. They were both art and weapon, cherished heirlooms and lethal tools. Long after the spies who created them turned to dust, these fabrics survived, their hidden meanings fading into folklore, their once urgent warnings now silent patterns in museums. Yet to the trained eye, they remain a testament to an age when even beauty could be a battlefield, and the softest threads sometimes carried the deadliest messages. Behind the solemn chants and copied scriptures of medieval monasteries lay another, far more clandestine craft: the art of hiding secrets in sacred texts. Monks, often serving as scribes, diplomats, and even spies for kings and popes, turned their scriptoriums into workshops of subterfuge. Their tools, prayer books, psalters, and Bibles, their margins crawling with more than just pious annotations. To the untrained eye, these were simply the doodles of bored clerics, but to those in the know, a crooked line in the margin could signal a treasonous plot, or an oddly capitalized letter might reveal the location of hidden gold. Take the Lincolnshire Psalter, a seemingly ordinary devotional book from the 13th century. Between its gilded prayers, careful examination reveals clusters of tiny dots beneath certain words, a cipher key for correspondents who knew to count them. Elsewhere, a monk named Brother Anselm left what appeared to be random ink smudges beside Psalm 51. But when traced with a ruler, they formed precise coordinates pointing to a cache of weapons smuggled into York ahead of a rebellion. Even the decorative initials weren't safe. In one French abbey's chronicles, the looping vines of a D concealed the names of nobles plotting against the crown, their identities embedded in the number of leaves or berries woven into the design. Some codes exploited the liturgy itself. A spy might underline every seventh word in a hymn to extract a hidden sentence, or use the placement of feast days in a calendar to mark rendezvous points. The most audacious schemes repurposed the pen trials scribes used to test their quills, those seemingly meaningless strokes at the end of a page. In the Winchester Troper, a collection of musical notation, these scribbles resolved into a crude map when overlaid, revealing tunnel routes beneath the bishop's palace. But the true genius of monastic codes lay in their immunity. Who would dare accuse a monk of treason for annotating scripture? Suspicious margentia could be passed off as devotional fervor, and the church's own reverence for books shielded them from scrutiny. After all, burning a holy text to check for invisible ink was tantamount to heresy. This holy camouflage made abbeys ideal hubs for intelligence networks, their libraries serving as dead drop locations, their messengers moving unchallenged across borders under the guise of pilgrimage. Perhaps the most chilling example comes from the Cluny Abbey archives, where a 10th century missal contains what scholars long assumed were simple spelling errors. But under ultraviolet light, the mistakes align perfectly with a cipher wheel discovered in a Spanish duke's tomb, exposing a clandestine correspondence between monks and Moorish rulers that may have prolonged the Reconquista by decades. It's a stark reminder that in the shadowy interplay of faith and power, even the word of God could be twisted into a weapon. In the bustling markets of medieval Europe, where merchants haggled over spices and silks, another kind of exchange was happening beneath the surface, one that had nothing to do with trade. The colorful slang of vendors, known as merchants' cant, wasn't just about bartering, it was a perfect cover for spies. Picture a wool trader casually shouting about Flemish blue to his apprentice. To customers, it meant a dye color. To his allies, it signaled that the Duke's troops were massing near Bruges. What sounded like harmless shop talk could alter the course of wars. This mercantile double-speak thrived because traders already had reason to be discreet. Avoiding taxes, undercutting rivals, or smuggling contraband required coded language long before spies adopted it. A phrase like "Venetian glass needs careful packing" might refer to fragile cargo, or a plot against the Doge that required delicate handling. The genius was in how ordinary it seemed. Unlike ciphers hidden in tapestries or books, merchants' cant blended into the noise of commerce, making it nearly impossible to detect unless you were part of the network. Regional variations added layers of security. In London's docks, Norwegian timber could mean Swedish warships sighted in the North Sea, while in Genoa, the same phrase warned of a papal emissary arriving by land. Some networks even used produce quality as code. Overripe figs implied a deadline missed, while first press oil confirmed a mission success. The seasonal nature of goods provided built-in updates. A sudden switch from discussing winter furs to spring herbs might signal that a frozen mountain pass had thawed, allowing troop movements. The system's brilliance lay in its flexibility. When authorities caught on to one phrase, merchants simply shifted meanings. After the 1473 crackdown in Burgundy, where Rhenish wine was exposed as code for mercenary payments, traders began using barrel sizes instead. A hogshead of claret now meant gold for bribes. This fluidity made merchants' count nearly unbreakable, as codes evolved faster than spies could be intercepted. But perhaps its most enduring legacy was how it empowered non-elites. Unlike noble spies who relied on expensive ciphers or invisible inks, market count required no education, just sharp ears and a talent for improvisation. A fishwife's cry about eels going cheap could rally a rebellion as effectively as a sealed royal missive. In an era where most intelligence systems served the powerful, this was espionage by the people, hidden in the shouts and gestures of everyday life. Long after kings and their codebooks faded, the slippery language of the marketplace kept its secrets, proving that sometimes the best place to hide a message was in plain hearing. The most ingenious spies knew that the best messages weren't just hidden, they were invisible until the precise moment they needed to be seen. Enter the world of medieval invisible inks, where a seemingly blank parchment could burst into revelation with nothing more than the warmth of a candle flame or the stroke of a brush. What made these formulas so brilliant wasn't just their secrecy, but their accessibility. Forget high-tech solutions, the best inks were concocted from everyday substances sitting in kitchens and chambers across Europe. Lemon juice, milk, even urine each had the power to vanish on parchment, only to reappear under the right conditions, like a ghost stepping into the light. Take lemon juice, the quintessential spy tool. Its mild acidity made it perfect for clandestine notes. When dried, the juice left no visible trace, but heat transformed it. A spy could write an entire battle plan, let it fade to nothing, then smuggle it past guards as an empty scroll. Held near a brazier, the sugars in the juice would caramelize, turning the message a smoky brown, visible only to the recipient who knew to apply flame. The Venetians perfected this during their conflicts with Genoa, using lemon-inked letters to coordinate naval strikes without ever risking interception. But citrus wasn't the only kitchen staple turned spycraft essential. Milk, with its subtle proteins, became another favorite. Unlike lemon juice, milk-based ink required a different developer, not heat but iodine. A spy might soak a letter in a tincture made from seaweed ash, watching as the iodine reacted with the milk's casein to reveal deep blue letters. This method was particularly popular among monastic spies, who could pass off the iodine as medicinal supplies if questioned. Then there were the more unconventional choices. Urine, especially when fermented, created an ink that only surfaced under ultraviolet light, centuries before modern science understood why. The ammonia in aged urine reacted with certain parchment treatments, creating compounds that fluoresced faintly under sunlight. Arab spies during the Crusades used this technique, writing messages on the backs of maps that glowed just enough to read when held at a specific angle to the sun. The real artistry, though, lay in combining these methods. A master spy might write one message in lemon juice, then overlay it with a second in milk, creating layers of intel that appeared sequentially, first with heat, then with iodine. Others mixed their inks with crushed gallnuts or alum, creating formulations that required specific chemical triggers to appear. The Byzantines even developed sympathetic inks that only reacted when paired, like two halves of a broken seal. Write with one substance, and the message remained hidden until brushed with its counterpart, a safeguard ensuring only the intended recipient could unveil the words. What made these inks truly revolutionary was their deniability. A spy caught with a blank parchment couldn't be charged with espionage, even if their captors suspected hidden writing. Without the right developer, the exact flame temperature, the precise chemical, the secret stayed buried. And in a world where torture was routine, that ambiguity was often the difference between life and death. From the Habsburg courts to the Silk Road caravans, invisible inks turned every scrap of parchment into a potential trove of secrets, proving that sometimes the most powerful messages were the ones no one could see. No book has baffled scholars quite like the Voynich Manuscript, a 200-page mystery written in an alphabet no one can read, filled with illustrations of plants that don't exist and astrological diagrams that defy known cosmology. Discovered in a Jesuit library in 1912 but dating back to the early 15th century, this enigmatic tome has been called the world's most unbreakable cipher. But was it actually a spy's masterpiece? The theories range from an elaborate hoax to an alchemist's notebook, yet the most compelling possibility is that it served as a covert communication tool, its bewildering contents designed to conceal explosive secrets in plain sight. Consider the manuscript structure. Unlike typical medieval texts, its pages are a chaotic mix of botanical drawings, naked women bathing in green liquid, and endless paragraphs of looping, invented script. At first glance, it seems like nonsense, but that may have been the point. For a spy network operating in hostile territory, a book that looked like gibberish was the perfect dead drop. Intercept it, and you'd dismiss it as the ramblings of a madman. But to initiates, those nonsense plants could be coded references to political factions, each quirky illustration a veiled message about troop movements or assassination plots. The repetitive word patterns, which linguists say resemble real language structures, might even be a sophisticated cipher, one that changes meaning based on context, like merchants can't for the elite. Some of the most persuasive evidence comes from the manuscript's astronomical section. Among its strange circular diagrams, one stands out, a series of castle-like towers connected by what appear to be pipes or pathways. To modern eyes, it's surreal, but to a 15th century spy, it could have been a schematic, a hidden map of siege tunnels beneath a city's walls or the layout of a fortress's secret passages. The so-called bathing women pages raise even more intrigue. Dubbed nymphs by researchers, these figures float in interlocking tubes and pools, yet their poses mirror known alchemical illustrations of distillation processes. Was this a chemical cipher where the positions of limbs and vessels corresponded to quantities or ingredients for invisible ink formulas? Theories about its origins only deepen the mystery. Carbon dating places the vellum between 1404 and 1438, squarely in the era when Alfonso V of Aragon was waging covert wars across Italy. Notably, his court employed Jewish cryptographers expelled from Spain, experts in layered ciphers who could have crafted a system as complex as the Voynich. Others tie it to the court of Rudolf II, the Habsburg emperor obsessed with occult espionage, who supposedly purchased the manuscript for 600 gold ducats, an astronomical sum for mere curiosities. Then there's the bohemian herbalist angle. The plants, though fantastical, may be symbolic composites. A flower with jagged leaves might represent the Duke of Milan's forces, while a root shaped like a dagger could signal an impending strike. Yet skepticism persists. Could it simply be an elaborate medieval scam, like the proto-Renaissance equivalent of selling fake alien blueprints? Maybe. But the sheer labor involved, the consistency of the script, the precision of the illustrations suggests deeper purpose. Modern codebreakers, from World War II cryptographers to AI algorithms, have failed to crack it, hinting at a system either brilliantly advanced or deliberately flawed. What makes the Voynich manuscript so tantalizing isn't just its unsolved code, but what it represents: the perfect spycraft artifact. A document that refuses to reveal whether it's genius or madness, a treasure map or a red herring. And in that ambiguity lies its true power, because in the shadows of medieval espionage, the most effective secrets weren't the ones hidden away. They were the ones staring everyone in the face, laughing silently across the centuries. Hidden in the simple lines and dots of children's games lay one of medieval espionage's most enduring tools, the pigpen cipher. At first glance, it looked like nothing more than a grid of tic-tac-toe boards filled with symbols. But in the hands of spies, these geometric shapes became an unbreakable language, turning every doodle into a potential death warrant. The cipher's brilliance was in its adaptability, easy enough for a courier to memorize, yet complex enough to frustrate even the most determined codebreakers. The system worked by dividing the alphabet into grids. Imagine 4 tic-tac-toe boards, 2 with dots placed in each compartment. Each letter occupied a specific corner or intersection, represented by a fragment of the grid around it. An X might sit where the lines met, while a dot in the upper right corner signaled a completely different character. To the untrained eye, a message looked like a collection of abstract angles and marks. But to initiates, it was as readable as plain text once you knew which grid to use. During the Albigensian Crusade, Cathar spies used variations of this cipher to coordinate resistance against French forces. A symbol resembling a makeshift fence post could stand for safe house, while a shape like a tilted ladder meant interceptor nearby. The real power came from customization. Networks would rotate grids weekly, so a symbol that meant attack 1 month might signify retreat the next. Some operatives took it further, adding extra dots or lines to create entirely new cipher layers, like a linguistic onion that peeled differently for each viewer. One notorious example comes from the court of Louis XI, where a suspected spy's laundry list revealed strange markings beside wool and soap purchases. Interrogators dismissed them as household tallies until an astute clerk noticed they matched grid fragments from a confiscated cipher key. The decoded message exposed a plot to poison 3 royal advisors, with symbols depicting vials and timestamps hidden among laundry notes. What made the pigpen cipher so resilient was its deniability. Unlike complex substitution codes requiring cipher wheels or codebooks, this system relied on memory and minimal visual cues. A spy could scratch symbols into tree bark, stitch them into clothing seams, or arrange them with pebbles on a path, all while maintaining plausible ignorance if caught. Even under torture, many operatives genuinely couldn't reveal keys they'd never seen, as some networks used rotating visual mnemonics like stained glass patterns or masonry marks to trigger recall. By the late Middle Ages, the cipher had evolved beyond grids. Some versions used variations of the Masonic Royal Arch system, where layered geometric shapes corresponded to syllables instead of letters. Others incorporated heraldic motifs. A fleur-de-lis's curves might encode an entire word, turning coats of arms into clandestine message boards. This flexibility ensured the pigpen remained in use long after quills gave way to printing presses, proving that sometimes the simplest shapes could guard the deadliest secrets. Between the staves of medieval sheet music, spies found an unlikely ally, a language where melodies carried more than just harmony, where every note could be a weapon. Imagine a troubadour strumming a lute in a crowded hall, his song indistinguishable from any other courtly entertainment. But to certain ears, that ascending scale wasn't just artistry, it was a map. The third note's duration might mark the distance to a hidden armory, while a sudden shift to minor key warned of approaching enemies. This was musical espionage, where compositions became cryptographic masterpieces, their beauty masking their true purpose. Take the case of a 15th-century Burgundian composer, or so he seemed. His motets, praised for their complexity, were actually sonic ciphers. The placement of rests corresponded to dates, while repeated intervals spelled out names using a system where, for example, a perfect fifth stood for the letter E. One particularly ornate choral piece performed before Duke Philip the Good contained a hidden warning about an assassination plot the tenors sustained. A signaled the 10th day of the month, and the alto's descending line pointed to the chapel as the danger zone. The Duke's musicians, oblivious to the subterfuge, simply marveled at the composition's innovative structure. Sacred music offered even richer camouflage. Gregorian chant, with its unadorned monophony, was ideal for smuggling secrets. A spy might alter neumes, those squiggly medieval notation marks, to encode messages. A punctum, a simple dot, could represent a safe house, while a climacus, a descending stack of notes, might indicate a drop point. In one chilling example, a Benedictine monk's antiphona contained what appeared to be smudged ink near the Gloria. Under magnification, the marks resolved into tiny dots positioning archers along a monastery wall, a defense plan disguised as a scribe's error. The true virtuosos, though, were the minnesingers of Germanic courts. Their love songs followed strict poetic forms, but the cleverest among them embedded acrostics in their melodies. Sing the first letters of each note's name in a particular stanza, and you'd spell out a fortress's weak points. Some even used rhythmic ciphers, a sequence of breves and longs matching the Morse-like tap codes prisoners would later use in wartime. A surviving lute tablature from Bavaria hides battle coordinates in its fingering patterns, the spacing between frets corresponding to latitude, while the pluck order revealed longitude. What made musical codes so formidable was their imperviousness to scrutiny. Burning a suspicious letter was one thing, but destroying a beautiful mass setting. Unthinkable, even if authorities suspected a score contained secrets, decoding required both musical literacy and cipher knowledge, a rare combination. And unlike static documents, music lived in performance. A spy could hum a coded melody to a confederate in public, leaving no physical trace. From the cathedrals of France to the taverns of Constantinople, these clandestine compositions turned every musician into a potential courier and every song into a whispered conspiracy. In the herb-scented workshops of medieval apothecaries, where bundles of dried plants hung from the rafters and mortar bowls held powders for every ailment, another kind of healing was happening, one that had nothing to do with medicine. To the untrained eye, these shops were places of remedy and ritual, but to those who knew the language, a simple request for rosemary and thyme could be a matter of life and death. Herbalists, often the only literate figures in rural communities, became unlikely spymasters, turning their knowledge of plants into a sophisticated code that wove through the fabric of everyday life. The system thrived on dual meanings. Common herbs carried secret associations known only to initiates. Rosemary, with its hardy nature and unmistakable scent, often signaled a safe meeting place, likely because it grew in monastery gardens where conspirators could gather under the guise of piety. Lavender meant discretion, a nod to its use in washing linens and erasing traces. Even poisonous plants had roles. Wolfsbane whispered of imminent danger, while belladonna's inclusion in an order might confirm an assassination plot. The beauty of this code lay in its naturalness. No inquisitor would question an apothecary's ledger filled with mundane recipes, even if the quantities were all wrong. 3 sprigs of sage where one would do, or an impossible demand for out-of-season marigolds. Regional variations added layers to the cipher. In England, St. John's wort could reference loyalty to the crown, while in Occitania, the same herb flagged a Cathar sympathizer. Some networks assigned numeric values based on a plant's medicinal properties. Feverfew's use for headaches might equate it to the number 7, turning an herb list into a date or location. The most cunning operatives exploited Latin plant names for acrostics, where the first letters of Rosmarinus officinalis, Salvia officinalis, Tanacetum vulgare spelled out RSD, a known assassin's initials. One surviving manuscript from 15th century Prague reveals how far the deception went. A healer's notebook details a poultice for joint pain, calling for equal parts yarrow and vervain. But pressed between the pages is a letter confirming that Yarrow meant archers and Vervain the eastern gate, exposing a plot to infiltrate the city walls. Elsewhere, a merchant's shopping list from Burgundy appears to order excessive amounts of mint until you notice the pattern. Every third herb is fictitious. Cross-referenced with a seized cipher key, the fake names corresponded to the strengths of a mercenary company camped nearby. Perhaps the most brilliant adaptation was the use of dried herb bouquets as living maps. A spy might deliver a bundle where the length of each stem marked distances, and the knots in the twine indicated turns. In one documented case, a bundle of lavender from Provence was found to have its stems notched at precise intervals. When laid against a map, the notches aligned with hidden mountain passes used by rebel forces. What made herbal codes so enduring was their organic flexibility. Unlike rigid ciphers that required keys or tools, this system lived in the landscape itself. A burned garden could be replanted, a confiscated ledger replaced, and because apothecaries traveled freely between castles and cottages, their trade provided perfect cover for moving messages. Long after the Middle Ages ended, fragments of this green language linger in folk remedies, in the symbolic bouquets of lovers, even in the nursery rhymes that once perhaps carried warnings only the initiated could hear. The rhythmic tolling of church bells was more than just a call to prayer. It was the medieval world's early warning system, a network of sonic signals that could mobilize towns, sound alarms, or even smuggle secrets under the guise of sacred tradition. In an era before telegraphs or rapid messengers, bells were the fastest way to broadcast information across vast distances, their tones carrying further than shouts or horns. But what sounded like orderly worship to the untrained ear often hid urgent, even life or death messages in their patterns. Take the classic tintinnabulation, the sequence of strikes that marked the hours. While most heard a simple timekeeper, spies recognized deliberate variations. In the French countryside during the 100 Years' War, a bell ringer might delay the third stroke by half a breath, signaling that English troops had been spotted at the river crossing. Further south, the order of bells could flip. Normandy's parishes used this trick to warn of tax collectors approaching, giving smugglers time to hide their goods. Even the pitch held meaning. A cracked bell's dissonant tone, normally an embarrassment, might indicate a compromised safe house when rung during vespers. The most sophisticated systems treated bells like a musical cipher. In 14th century Florence, the famed Duomo's campanile had bells named after saints, each representing a different faction or threat. A sequence beginning with San Giovanni, the deepest bell, followed by Santa Riparotta. The highest could mean the Medici family needed immediate extraction, while reversing the order warned of a pending arrest. This wasn't mere superstition. Surviving records from Siena's archives confirm that bellringers were paid extra for special peals, their schedules corresponding exactly to known political crises. Some codes exploited the physicality of ringing itself. In Bohemia, a method called hämmerling involved muffling the bell with a leather strap mid-toll, creating a stuttering rhythm that could pinpoint locations. Two clear strikes, a muted third, and another clear tone might direct rebels to a forest clearing 2 leagues north and 3 east. Coastal towns like Bruges took this further, using tidal bells normally rung for fishermen to guide ships carrying contraband or fugitives by altering the intervals between chimes. But the true mastery lay in plausible deniability. Unlike an intercepted letter or a tapped conversation, bell codes were ephemeral. A suspicious official might hear an odd sequence, but by the time he investigated, the sound had faded, leaving no evidence beyond uneasy whispers. This impermanence made bells ideal for high-stakes messages. During the Spanish Inquisition, accused crypto-Jews in Aragon used coded peals to coordinate midnight escapes, their signals buried in the legitimate clamor of feast day celebrations. Even the church's own bell-ringing manuals sometimes contained hidden layers. One 15th century German guide includes an apparently pious note about variations pleasing to God, which deciphers as instructions for warning heretics of raids. Perhaps the most chilling example comes from the Siege of Malta in 1565, where the Knights Hospitaller allegedly transmitted Turkish fleet movements by bell to inland villages, not through the bell sounds but their silences. A missing midday toll meant galleys had been sighted east of the island, while a skipped compline bell signaled attack by night. It was a stroke of psychological genius. The absence of expected sound carried further and more ominously than any clamor could. From the alpine villages of Switzerland to the marsh towns of England, these ringing codes turned every church tower into a potential nerve center. Long after their original meanings faded, the legacy of these signals lingers in the funeral tolls that still count the deceased's age, or the wedding bells whose joyous chaos might once have masked something far more clandestine. A testament to human ingenuity where even the holiest sounds could harbor secrets. Behind the motley costumes and raucous laughter of medieval court jesters lay one of history's most audacious spy networks, where every joke could be a coded message and every pratfall a distraction for treason. These jesters, often dismissed as mere entertainers, wielded a privilege none other possessed, the license to mock kings to their faces without fear of punishment. But what sounded like harmless satire to the court often carried deadly serious intel, wrapped in wordplay so clever that even if intercepted, the message remained safe. Take the case of Triboulet, the infamous fool of King Louis XII. His seemingly drunken ramblings about the fox in the henhouse were laughed off until it was discovered he'd been warning of a nobleman's plot to embezzle treasury funds. The genius, he'd delivered the warning in a rhyming riddle during a bawdy song, ensuring the king remembered the phrase while his enemies dismissed it as nonsense. Other jesters used similar tactics, embedding names in acrostics within their limericks or timing their jests to coincide with clandestine meetings elsewhere in the castle. Regional variations added layers to the deception. In Burgundy, jesters performed a routine called the blind man's blunder, where stumbling into furniture supposedly by accident actually marked the locations of hidden compartments in the room. Spanish fools perfected the art of mirror jesting, appearing to mock themselves while subtly insulting a visiting dignitary, testing alliances without the king needing to speak a word. The most skilled could even manipulate foreign envoys. A jester in the Habsburg court once pretended to mispronounce a Polish delegate's title, turning voivode into void oath, a signal that the diplomat's promises were worthless. But the true mastery lay in plausible deniability. Unlike ciphers or invisible ink, a jester's words left no physical trace. If confronted, they could claim misinterpretation. After all, who would arrest a fool for a poorly told joke? This ambiguity made them ideal couriers. Records from the Tudor court reveal that Will Sommers, Henry VIII's jester, often carried verbal updates between the king and Thomas Cromwell, disguising them as mocking impersonations of various ministers. One particularly sharp barb about a crow among swans reportedly warned Cromwell of growing dissent in the Privy Council. Perhaps the most chilling example comes from the court of Ivan the Terrible, where the jester Balakaev survived multiple purges by encoding troop movements in nursery rhymes. When he sang of 3 black horses stumbling at the broken bridge, it signaled that Muscovite cavalry had encountered sabotage at a key river crossing. By the time Ivan's advisors deciphered the pattern, Balakaev had already fled, leaving behind a legacy that proved even tyrants could be outwitted by laughter. From the tapestries of Westminster to the frozen halls of Novgorod, jesters turned merriment into a weapon, their antics a smokescreen for the dangerous game of intelligence. They remind us that in the shadow play of medieval politics, sometimes the sharpest blades were hidden not in sheaths, but in punchlines. Under the cover of darkness, when whispers couldn't carry and parchment burned too easily, medieval spies turned to the silent language of light. Imagine a lone tower on the horizon, its flickering beacon mirroring the stars, except one torch burns too long, another too briefly. To soldiers on patrol, it's just a watchman's oversight. But to a rebel hiding in the trees, it's a lifeline. The bridge is guarded. Take the ford instead. This was the clandestine art of flag and lantern signaling, a visual shorthand that transformed the night itself into a tapestry of secrets. Coastal towns had long used simple light codes to guide ships, 3 quick flashes for safe harbor, 1 prolonged for danger. Spies simply borrowed this maritime language and weaponized it. During the Reconquista, Moorish sympathizers in Valencia arranged colored lanterns in cathedral towers, blue for incoming supply ships, red for troop movements, green for betrayal. The brilliance lay in how openly these signals operated. A sentry might reprimand a slow-witted apprentice for mixing up the lanterns, never realizing those mistakes were alerting partisans in the hills. In landlocked regions, flags took the place of flames. The Hussite rebels of Bohemia perfected a system where the position of a banner's tassels corresponded to numbers. A drooping left tassel might mean 300 enemy cavalry, while a knotted right one signaled 2 days' march away. Some networks even encoded messages in the way flags were folded during daylight. A standard bearing the crest of Burgundy, when folded with the lion's head inward, warned of spies in the Duke's retinue. The most sophisticated systems combined light with movement. Venetian agents in Constantinople devised a method where the rhythm of swinging lanterns spelled out letters, a precursor to naval semaphore. 2 long swings followed by 3 short ones might represent BOS for the Bosphorus Strait, warning of Ottoman patrols. Meanwhile, in Scotland, clans used fire arrows arcing over glens as living punctuation, a single arc for affirmation, a cluster for alarm. But the true stroke of genius was misdirection. Smart operatives camouflaged their signals within legitimate rituals. The nightly lighting of shrine lamps in Santiago de Compostela followed a strict order, unless the priest was part of the network, in which case he'd light the Virgin's lamp before the apostles to indicate safe passage through the city gates. Even the Inquisition couldn't prosecute a cleric for minor liturgical errors. By the Wars of the Roses, these visual codes had grown so nuanced that some noble households trained falcons to react to specific light patterns. A bird released at the sight of 2 blue lanterns might carry a tiny scroll to a waiting ally. Others exploited the era's superstitions, using witch lights in marshes to scare off outsiders while guiding conspirators along dry paths. Whether fluttering from a castle battlement or glimmering across a black river, these signals turned every flicker into a potential revolution, proving that sometimes the brightest secrets were the ones everyone saw but only a few could understand. When a medieval spy's life depended on their secrets vanishing without a trace, they didn't just hide messages, they made them disappear in the most literal sense. Imagine a courier cornered by enemy guards, their hidden parchment seconds from being discovered. With no time to flee, they'd do the unthinkable, cram the incriminating note into their mouth and swallow it whole. These weren't acts of desperation, they were calculated last resorts, honed by networks where capture meant torture, and a scrap of parchment could doom an entire rebellion. The technique had a grim elegance. Notes were written on the thinnest possible vellum, sometimes soaked in oil to make them easier to ingest. Some operatives even trained to chew and swallow while speaking, masking the act as a nervous tic. During the Peasants' Revolt of 1381, one rebel leader reportedly sewed tiny scrolls into hollowed-out bread crusts if caught. He'd devour his own lunch before interrogators could demand a bite. But the real masters of this art were the Hashashin, the infamous medieval assassins, who wrote their orders on starch-based parchment that dissolved in water. A messenger could literally wash away evidence by dunking the note in a stream or even their own mouth. For spies who preferred their secrets to outlast their own lives, fireproof inks offered another solution. Alchemists in Moorish Spain developed formulations using crushed lapis lazuli and egg whites that resisted flame. A letter could be tossed into a brazier, only for the heat to reveal hidden text while the rest burned away. Venetian agents took this further, creating nested messages, an outer layer of flammable ink with mundane contents, concealing a fire-resistant core of true intelligence. One intercepted letter from Milanese archives appears charred at the edges, its visible text discussing wool tariffs, but in the center, untouched by flame, lies a different script entirely, a warning about French mercenaries disguised as merchants. The most extreme measures blurred the line between spycraft and sacrifice. In 1492, a captured agent in Granada bit through a glass vial sewn into his cheek, swallowing not just a message but the poison that would silence him forever. Others sewed coded notes into their own flesh, knowing interrogators might strip them but hesitate before flaying them alive. These weren't just tricks, they were in games, the final moves of a deadly chess match where the board itself was meant to vanish. And sometimes the most important secrets weren't the ones written down at all, but memorized in rhymes, prayers, or even the steps of a dance, carried to the grave if necessary. In the shadows of medieval espionage, survival wasn't just about keeping secrets. It was about becoming the cipher. Even the holiest books could serve as tools of deception in the hands of medieval spies. Imagine a priest piously reading his psalter, except his fingers aren't tracing devotion but coordinates. His thumb rests on Psalm 23, his forefinger lingers on the fourth line. To any observer, it's simple scripture, but to his contact across the chapel, those subtle gestures pinpoint a dead drop location, the third oak north of the churchyard, 4 paces east. This was the art of book ciphers, where sacred texts became vaults of secrets, and every verse hid a second meaning known only to initiates. The system thrived on its simplicity. Instead of risky cipher wheels or complex symbols, spies used existing books, most often the Bible, but also psalters, herbal encyclopedias, or even popular romances. Page numbers, line counts, and word positions transformed into codes. A seemingly innocent note reading John 3:16 might direct an ally to the third page, 16th word of their shared codebook, attack. More sophisticated versions used nested references, perhaps the 5th letter of the 7th word on page 92 spelled out a traitor's name. The beauty lay in deniability. If caught, a spy could claim they were merely meditating on scripture. Some of history's most notorious plots relied on this method. During the Babington conspiracy to overthrow Elizabeth I, Catholic plotters used a catechism manual where underlined letters corresponded to a grid cipher. Mary, Queen of Scots' fatal letters referenced innocuous gardening books, phrases about pruning roses, actually detailed which noble houses to target. Even the Knights Templar allegedly employed book ciphers during their trials, embedding coordinates for hidden treasure within psalms recited under torture. Regional variations added layers of security. Italian merchants used Dante's Divine Comedy, its 3 volumes allowing triple-layered messages. Byzantine spies preferred medical texts where page 154, line 8, might point to a description of fever symptoms or the weak point in a city's aqueduct. The most cunning operatives chose obscure reference books like almanacs or guild registers, ensuring only their network possessed the key text. Decoding required perfect synchronization. Partners needed identical additions down to the typesetting, since a single extra line could scramble the message. Some spies carried miniature travel Bibles with pages trimmed to match larger volumes back home. Others memorized specific editions by their quirks, a smudged letter on page 40, an ink blot near the Psalm of David. The system's fragility was also its strength. Steal the wrong book and the cipher collapsed into gibberish. Yet book ciphers had a fatal flaw: the human factor. An overeager spy might dog ear pages or leave fingernail marks, creating a trail for astute investigators. During the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre, Huguenot rebels were betrayed when Catholic soldiers noticed freshly inked numbers beside certain Bible verses. And unlike destroyed cipher wheels, books couldn't easily be erased. A captured codebook meant every prior message could be retroactively decoded. What made these textual sleights of hand endure was their adaptability. When the church banned certain ciphers, spies simply switched to approved devotional books. When authorities grew suspicious of marked Bibles, operatives used hymnals or even tavern menus. In an age where few owned more than one or two books, the mere possession of a specific volume, a particular herbal compendium, a dog-eared copy of the Canterbury Tales, could be the only credential a spy needed to prove their identity. Long after parchment notes turned to ash and cipher keys snapped under torture, these borrowed words remained, whispering secrets between the lines of history itself. In the crowded marketplaces and echoing halls of medieval Europe, where ears were everywhere and walls had a habit of whispering, silence became the ultimate disguise. Spies perfected a language of gestures so subtle, a raised eyebrow or the brush of a sleeve could topple empires. Unlike tapestries or invisible inks, these signals left no trace, just fleeting movements dismissed as nervous habits or random fidgeting. But to the trained eye, a merchant adjusting his belt buckle wasn't just fussing with his clothes, he was signaling how many guards stood at the city gate. Take the bustling wool markets of Flanders, where traders developed an elaborate system of hand signals under the guise of haggling. A finger tapped twice on a bolt of cloth might mean the shipment's been delayed, while twisting a coin between thumb and forefinger could warn we're being watched. The beauty of these gestures was their deniability. Interrupt the exchange, and you just see men arguing over prices. Even the positioning of goods carried meaning. A basket placed to the left of a stall entrance signaled safety, while to the right it warned of danger. Some networks took it further, using the folds of cloaks as living semaphore. The number of visible pleats when a spy draped their garment over a chair could indicate meeting times or troop strength. Courtiers refined these silent languages to an art. In the glittering halls of Burgundy, a lady's fan wasn't just a cooling accessory, it was a clandestine telegraph. Opening it slowly might confirm a plot success, while snapping it shut could abort a mission. The Florentine diplomat Machiavelli wrote of ambassadors who communicated through prearranged coughs during negotiations, each hack carrying specific intel about the opposing delegation's weaknesses. One particularly bold scheme involved the papal court, where cardinals used liturgical hand gestures during Mass to coordinate political maneuvers. The same motions that blessed the congregation also identified which bishop could be bribed. The most sophisticated systems treated the whole body as a cipher. English spies during the War of the Roses developed a gait code. Limping slightly meant enemy cavalry were near, while dragging one foot signaled infantry movements. In Constantinople, Byzantine agents used the angle of their fez tassels to mark dead drops, tilted forward for documents, backward for weapons. Even something as innocuous as a sneeze could be weaponized. The court jester of Aragon was said to fake allergic fits to warn of approaching assassins, with the number of false sneezes corresponding to how many killers lurked in the shadows. What made these silent languages so formidable was their adaptability. Unlike rigid cipher systems requiring keys or tools, gestures could evolve in real time. A spy might scratch their ear to signal danger one day, then switch to rubbing their chin the next if they suspected their code was compromised. Some networks even exploited cultural differences. A gesture considered rude in one region could be innocuous in another, allowing messengers to accidentally offend their way out of interrogations. Perhaps the most chilling example comes from the Venetian Republic's infamous Council of Ten, whose agents perfected a blink code during trials. Prisoners would unknowingly reveal accomplices under torture, not through screams, but by involuntary eye movements when specific names were mentioned. Observers noted the patterns, then relayed them through their own controlled blinks to colleagues outside. It was psychological warfare at its most insidious, proving that even the body's smallest tremors could betray secrets. From the smoke-filled taverns of London to the sun-drenched plazas of Seville, these unspoken dialects turned every gesture into a potential lie and every casual motion into a loaded statement. They remind us that in the game of shadows, sometimes the most powerful words are the ones never spoken aloud. Pigeons weren't just birds in medieval Europe. They were feathered couriers with wings faster than any horseman. These remarkable creatures, bred for their homing instincts, could carry tiny scrolls across hundreds of miles, weaving through enemy territory where human messengers would be intercepted. The contents were often encrypted. A single grain of rice might bear microscript visible only under magnification, or a scroll no larger than a fingernail could list troop movements in cipher. Some spies even trained their pigeons to recognize specific rooftops or windows, ensuring deliveries reached only the right hands. In sieges where walls blocked human runners, these birds became lifelines. During the Siege of Paris in the 9th century, Vikings reportedly shot down carrier pigeons mid-flight, only to find the messages wrapped in silk and written in code they couldn't crack. Dogs, too, played unexpected roles in this silent network. Mastiffs and greyhounds weren't just guardians, they were mobile dead drops. A collar's lining might hide a scrap of vellum, or a hollowed-out bone could carry battle plans. In border regions where patrols scrutinized every traveler, a lost hunting hound trotting between castles drew no suspicion. One account from the Scottish Wars of Independence describes a wounded deerhound returning to its master's rival, only for the nobleman to discover its collar bore not identification, but the coordinates of an English ambush. The most cunning handlers trained their dogs to lead enemies astray. A well-timed whistle might send the animal sprinting toward a decoy location, while the real message remained buried near its starting point. Then there were the bees, nature's tiniest spies. Beekeepers in the Byzantine Empire perfected a method of attaching gossamer thin threads to bees' legs, each thread dipped in wax to stiffen it into a makeshift quill. As the insects returned to their hives, they'd pass through strategically placed dye pots, leaving barely visible marks that formed letters when viewed in sequence. Other networks used the hives themselves as living cipher wheels. The position of a specific honeycomb cell, 3rd row, 5th hexagon, might correspond to a coded grid revealing the location of hidden arms caches. What made animal messengers so invaluable was their immunity to interrogation. A captured pigeon couldn't betray its handler under torture. A dog's loyalty couldn't be bribed. And bees, they were the ultimate deniable operatives, wild by nature, impossible to trace. Even when their methods were exposed, countermeasures faltered. Enemy forces might post archers to shoot down pigeons, only for spies to switch to nighttime releases. They'd guard kennels, not realizing the real message was tucked into the paw pad of a stray. They'd burn beehives, unaware the critical intelligence had already flown away on iridescent wings. From the dovecotes of Crusader castles to the kennels of French noble houses, animals became unwitting accomplices in the shadow war of intelligence. Their stories remind us that medieval espionage wasn't just a human endeavor. It was a collaboration with creatures whose instincts and behaviors could be harnessed, honed, and sometimes outwit even the most cunning of kings. In the winding streets of medieval cities, where every alleyway echoed with a dozen different tongues, the most effective spies weren't those who spoke flawlessly, but those who spoke wrong on purpose. Picture a merchant haggling in the marketplace, his garbled mix of French and Flemish making shopkeepers shrug and turn away. To the untrained ear, he's just another foreigner struggling with the local dialect. But to his contact leaning against the alehouse door, those deliberate mispronunciations, a dropped consonant here, an exaggerated vowel there, are a perfect cipher camouflaged as incompetence. This was dialect masking, where spies weaponized the chaos of language itself, turning regional quirks and fabricated accents into an impenetrable shield. The practice thrived in border regions where linguistic collisions were already the norm. A spy crossing from Burgundy into Lorraine might adopt a thick Ardennes twang, peppering sentences with nonsensical provincial slang. The goal wasn't to blend in, but to stand out just enough to be dismissed as harmless. Historical records from the Hanseatic League describe traders who feigned Baltic dialects so crude, rivals assumed they were simpletons, never realizing their broken speech concealed precise details about grain shipments and guild alliances. Some operatives went further, inventing entirely fake accents. The notorious Greenland Creole used by Norse spies sounded vaguely Scandinavian but followed its own grammatical rules, ensuring any intercepted conversation would baffle outsiders. Religious pilgrims perfected the art of linguistic forgery. Wandering monks returning from the Holy Land often sprinkled their speech with mangled Arabic or Greek phrases, excused as souvenirs of their travels. But beneath the surface, these mistakes carried coded meanings. A Benedictine spy might greet a compatriot with Pax Christi, brother, then add a garbled wa salam if the coast was clear, the botched Arabic signaling safety. Other networks exploited regional rivalries. In Italy, where city-states mocked each other's pronunciations, a Florentine agent could deliberately butcher Venetian inflections to provoke laughter, distracting listeners while he passed a knife or a folded note under the table. The most audacious schemes involved constructed languages. The lingua ignota, a cipher language invented by the mystic Hildegard of Bingen, was reportedly adopted by German spies during the investiture controversy. Its thousand invented words like Arzon for king or Leufol for traitor sounded like pious nonsense to eavesdropping clergy. Elsewhere, troubadours crafted gibberish love songs where every third word came from a dead dialect, creating lyrical riddles only their handlers could solve. Even children's rhymes weren't safe. Nursery tunes in Occitan hid rebel messages behind layers of regional patois, their true meaning lost on French occupiers. But the true genius of dialect masking lay in its impermanence. Unlike ciphers carved into wood or stitched into tapestries, a voice leaves no physical trace. A spy could switch accents mid-conversation to abort a compromised exchange, or deliberately learn the local dialect better over weeks to signal phased operations. When the Habsburgs tried cracking down by forcing suspects to recite prayers in specific dialects, operatives simply feigned illiteracy, mumbling through Latin like choirboys with head colds. From the cacophony of Mediterranean ports to the hushed chapels of the Rhine, these vocal sleights of hand turned language into a hall of mirrors. They remind us that in the shadow war of medieval intelligence, sometimes the best way to hide a secret wasn't to whisper it, but to shout it in a voice no one would ever think to decode. Alchemists scribbling in candlelit chambers weren't just chasing the philosopher's stone. They were crafting the medieval equivalent of encrypted field manuals. Those cryptic symbols filling their manuscripts, from twisted serpents to celestial glyphs, often served a darker purpose: covert communication between assassins and their handlers. A swirling symbol for Mercury might seem like harmless alchemical notation, but to a trained eye, it could mark the dosage for a slow-acting poison or the location of a nobleman's private wine cellar. These weren't just recipes for turning lead into gold. They were death warrants disguised as doodles. Take the case of the infamous green lion devouring the sun, a common alchemical illustration showing a beast gnawing at a celestial orb. To most, it represented the purification of metals, but in the court of Louis XI, spies repurposed it as code. The lion's tail curling left meant target dines alone tonight, while claws extended signaled guard rotation changed. Even the colors held meaning. A green inked lion warned of tasters present, while a red one promised an untraceable toxin was en route. The symbol's ambiguity was their strength. Interrogators might torture a suspect over a seized letter, but who would dare accuse an alchemist of treason for pondering the mysteries of the cosmos? Some of the most chilling examples come from Venice's secret archives, where confiscated almanacs reveal layers of subterfuge. A seemingly innocent sketch of a dragon swallowing its tail. The Ouroboros concealed names when read counterclockwise. Each scale's position corresponded to letters in the Greek alphabet, spelling out targets along the Grand Canal. Elsewhere, astrological symbols became kill orders. A marginal drawing of Mars conjunct Saturn didn't predict war. It coordinated the simultaneous poisoning of two rival merchants during a planetary alignment, ensuring their deaths looked like divine retribution. The real genius lay in how these symbols evolved. Unlike static ciphers, alchemical notation was constantly shifting as practitioners discovered new elements or processes, giving spies built-in deniability. A symbol meaning arsenic one year might signify safe house the next, keyed to the latest scientific treatise. Some networks even exploited regional variations. In Prague, a crescent moon over a flask meant night attacks, while in Paris, the same symbol warned of bribed guards. This fluidity made the system nearly unbreakable. By the time an enemy decoded one set of symbols, the spies had moved on to new theories. Perhaps the most diabolical adaptation was the use of recipe codes. A formula for aqua regia, a gold-dissolving acid, might list ingredients like vitriol of Cyprus or luna cornea, but to initiates, the quantities weren't measurements, they were coordinates. 7 ounces of vitriol plus 3 of luna cornea could point to the 7th pier, 3rd warehouse in Limassol. Other recipes hid names in their abbreviations. S. V for Spiritus Vini, wine spirits, might actually mark Stefano Vigna, a marked traitor. What made alchemical espionage so enduring was its intellectual camouflage. In an era when natural philosophy and magic blurred, no inquisitor could reliably separate superstitious scribbles from lethal intelligence. A spy caught with a zodiac cipher could claim he was casting horoscopes. A vial of white powder labeled with the symbol for Luna, silver, might be medicine or powdered nightshade. From the poison labs of Cesare Borgia to the herbariums of Tudor England, these arcane symbols turned every alchemist's workshop into a potential hub of shadow warfare, where the line between science and assassination dissolved as completely as gold in aqua fortis. A sharp rap on a dungeon wall once, then twice, then a pause before 3 rapid knocks might sound like idle noise to a jailer pacing the corridors, but to the prisoner in the next cell, that rhythm screamed danger as clearly as a shouted warning. Medieval spies and captives turned the most mundane sounds into an invisible telegraph, knock codes where every tap and pause carried life or death meaning. These clandestine systems transformed stone walls into messengers, turning captivity itself into a conduit for secrets. The simplest versions mimicked natural noises, a pattern that could be passed off as rats scurrying or a restless inmate. During the Albigensian Crusade, Cathar prisoners held in Carcassonne's towers used sequences echoing the monastery's prayer bells. 2 knocks for matins meant guard change underway, while 7 for vespers signaled interrogator arriving. More sophisticated systems borrowed from existing ciphers. The Templars, imprisoned after their order's suppression, allegedly replicated the Pigpen cipher's geometric patterns through knocks, 3 left wall taps for the first grid corner, 2 floor strikes for the intersecting line. Interrogation chambers became brutal duets of hidden communication. A spy chained in a Nuremberg dungeon might feign agony under torture while his knuckles subtly rapped the table leg, each moan timed to mask the real message. In Spain, Jewish conversos facing the Inquisition developed a knock variation of Ladino, their secret language. A sequence mimicking the shofar's blast spelled out names of safe houses, while a pause matching the Sabbath candle lighting time confirmed the listener was trusted. But the true artistry lay in misdirection. The best operatives trained their captors to ignore certain rhythms. A Flemish rebel, imprisoned for forging documents, spent weeks tapping aimlessly until guards stopped reacting. Only then did he begin embedding codes in those random noises, using the same inattention that made his forgeries convincing. Others exploited architecture. A Venetian spy held in a flooded oubliette discovered his splashes carried farther than knocks. His coded waves warned allies of an impending attack right under his jailers' noses. Some systems blurred the line between signal and survival. During the siege of Malta, captured knights used knock sequences to coordinate hunger strikes, their weakening taps synchronized to demand better rations. In Constantinople's dungeons, prisoners facing execution tapped out their network's names in Byzantine Greek rhythmic verse, a final act of defiance that preserved intelligence even as the messenger perished. What made these echoes endure was their adaptability. Unlike complex ciphers requiring tools or literacy, knock codes needed only a surface and a will to resist. A shackled hand, a boot heel, even the chattering of teeth in the cold, all became instruments in this grim symphony. Long after medieval dungeons crumbled, their legacy lived on. From the tocsin alarms of the French Revolution to the tapped Morse codes of World War II prisoners, the language of knocks proved that even in darkness, silence could be shattered by those who knew how to listen. The story of medieval espionage isn't just one of brilliant ciphers and daring escapes, it's also a chronicle of fatal missteps, where a single cracked code could unravel entire networks in bloodshed. Take the tragic tale of Antoine de Bourgogne, a Burgundian diplomat whose elegant substitution cipher, a masterpiece of shifted alphabets, betrayed him in the cruelest way. Intercepted by French agents in 1442, his seemingly innocuous letter about harvest yields was held too close to a candle during inspection. The heat revealed ghostly lines of lemon-ink text beneath, detailing troop movements along the Seine. What followed wasn't just his execution, but a domino effect. His cipher key, extracted under torture, led to the slaughter of 12 fellow agents across 3 duchies. Even the most sophisticated systems weren't immune. Mary, Queen of Scots, learned this too late when her meticulously coded letters, using a nomenclator cipher that replaced names with symbols, were painstakingly reconstructed by Elizabeth I's codebreakers. The gallows doodle representing Lord Babington became her undoing. Once decoded, it condemned her to the block in 1587, but the real horror lay in the interceptors' patience. For months, they let Mary's network keep writing, feeding false intelligence while the noose tightened. By the time her allies realized their cipher was compromised, the evidence filled a damning ledger dubbed the Spyglass at Westminster. Then there were the hubris-fueled disasters. In 1499, Venetian operative Marco Dandolo arrogantly reused a cipher from his predecessor, a fatal mistake. Ottoman cryptographers who'd cracked the older messages intercepted his updates with ease. Dandolo's coded warning about a mutiny aboard a Turkish galley was deciphered before it reached allies. The Sultan's men ambushed the would-be rebels, then strung Dandolo's corpse from the mast with his own cipher wheel around his neck as a grisly lesson. Some failures bordered on Shakespearean irony. During the War of the Roses, Lancastrian spymaster Edmund Beaufort relied on a complex flag semaphore system only for a Yorkist archer to notice his men always positioned their banners identically during routine drills. The archer, a former cloth merchant, recognized the patterns as MATCHING, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, codes from his old trade. Overnight, Yorkist forces adapted the signals to stage a phony retreat, luring Beaufort's cavalry into a slaughter at St. Albans. The human cost of these breakdowns was staggering. When the Habsburgs cracked a Hussite knock code in 1526, they didn't just execute the captured spies. They forced their families to watch as each victim's hands were crushed with bell clappers, a grotesque parody of their signaling method. In Moorish Granada, a betrayed agent's swallowed message was recovered through the unthinkable. his stomach cut open post-execution, the half-digested parchment revealing not just his contacts, but the almond milk ink formula that had failed to dissolve in time. Yet perhaps the most haunting failures were the ones left unresolved. The Voynich Manuscript's undeciphered pages may hide disasters we'll never know, entire missions doomed by a single misinterpreted herb sketch or celestial diagram. And somewhere in the archives of the Spanish Inquisition, there's a confiscated psalter with faint marginalia that, when held to light, reveals a desperate last-minute warning. Scribbled too late to save the soul who sent it, these silent testaments remind us that for every cipher that held fast, countless others crumbled, taking brave lives with them into the darkness of history. The shadow of medieval espionage stretches far beyond castle walls and dusty manuscript. It lingers in the encrypted messages flashing across satellite networks today. Modern intelligence agencies, including the NSA and GCHQ, routinely scour ancient cipher techniques not as historical curiosities, but as viable inspiration for contemporary cryptography. That Caesar cipher you learned about in history class, its DNA lives on in modern shift-based algorithms, where data isn't just moved by 3 alphabetical positions, but by thousands of binary digits. The medieval practice of hiding messages in plain sight resurfaces in steganography, where today's spies embed classified data in everything from Instagram photos to the metadata of cat videos. Consider the parallels between medieval book ciphers and today's encryption protocols. Where monks once used Bible verses as shared keys, modern cryptographers employ massive prime numbers as the foundation of RSA encryption, both systems relying on prearranged shared knowledge to unlock secrets. The Pigpen cipher's geometric patterns find eerie echoes in QR codes and blockchain authentication, where spatial arrangements of data carry precise meaning. Even the Voynich Manuscript's layered mysteries inspire contemporary obfuscation algorithms, designed to baffle AI decryption attempts by embedding false leads within legitimate-seeming data streams. The NSA's declassified historical cryptologic collection reveals startling continuities. Their analysts still study Mary, Queen of Scots' fatal nomenclator cipher, not just for its flaws, but for how its elegant word substitution principles informed Cold War-era one-time pads. Medieval fireproof inks have evolved into tempest protocols that make digital messages self-destruct if intercepted, while the Hashashin's swallowable messages find their counterpart in modern, ephemeral, encrypted apps that erase conversations after reading. Even animal messengers have gone digital. Cybersecurity firms now train AI canaries to mimic medieval pigeons, delivering decoy data packets that reveal intrusion attempts before real secrets are compromised. Perhaps the most profound legacy lies in operational philosophy. Medieval spies understood that perfect encryption matters less than psychological advantage. Why the NSA still teaches operatives to exploit human complacency, just as Venetian agents did with their double-blind merchant codes. When Russian hackers recently embedded commands in JPEG ski vacation photos, they channeled the same cunning as 13th-century monks hiding battle plans in hymn notations. And just as Templar spies memorized secrets to leave no physical trace, today's field agents use neural implants that store encrypted data in brainwave patterns, leaving nothing to intercept. From the alchemist's workshop to the quantum computing lab, the core truth remains unchanged. The best secrets aren't those locked away, but those disguised as something else entirely. As we stand on the brink of AI-driven cyber warfare, the whispers of medieval cryptographers still echo, a reminder that while technology evolves, the art of deception remains timeless. The minds of medieval spies were masterclasses in deception, turning the ordinary into the extraordinary with a flicker of ingenuity. They didn't just invent codes, they weaponized the mundane, weaving secrets into tapestries, disguising battle plans as hymns, and turning a loaf of bread into a compass. Their brilliance wasn't in complexity alone, but in how seamlessly they hid their secrets in plain sight, trusting that the world would dismiss them as too trivial to scrutinize. As we unravel their methods today, it's impossible not to marvel at their audacity and to wonder what modern equivalents surround us now. Consider the digital age. Your morning playlist might seem harmless, but could the rhythm of those songs be masking something more? Algorithms already manipulate what we see. Could they also be whispering covert messages in plain audio? Those endless social media ads for products you barely glanced at, could their timing or placement be a signal to someone else entirely? Medieval spies would have adored today's metadata, where a simple hashtag or geotag could carry layers of meaning visible only to the right eyes. Even older systems persist. The floral arrangements in corporate lobbies, the specific order of items on a menu at high-end restaurants, the subtle hand gestures of diplomats during press conferences. How many of these are genuine, and how many are carefully staged communications? The medieval practice of hiding maps in embroidery finds its echo in modern infographics, where a subway map or a fitness tracker's data visualization might conceal patterns only insiders recognize. The takeaway isn't paranoia, it's perspective. History shows us that the most effective secrets aren't locked away, they're camouflaged as everyday noise. So the next time you pass a street musician's repetitive tune or notice a peculiar pattern in app notifications, ask yourself, if a medieval spy could turn a bell's toll into a battle cry, what might be hidden in the digital hum of your daily life? If these historical mysteries fascinate you, there's more to uncover. From the lost languages of ancient traders to the unsolved ciphers of the Renaissance, the past is riddled with enigmas waiting to be decoded. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell. You won't want to miss the next chapter in humanity's endless game of hide and seek with the truth. And who knows? Maybe you'll start seeing the world not just as it appears, but as it truly is, a tapestry of secrets stitched together by the cleverest minds across time.